What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and in today's video, we are going to do some team building. So, in the past couple of weeks, there have been some roster moves that have happened. Cloud9 has announced that they're going to be making some roster moves. Fudge is going back to top lane, things like that. And we've had a lot of discussions about North American talent and, why aren't certain players getting a shot. But instead of talking about players that everybody doesn't know about, because honestly, I don't know a lot of players who aren't in the professional leagues, we're going to take the bottom teams from regions and then build teams, like the best possible team from those teams. So the reason why I would, suggest doing something like this is because it shows one of two things. It shows just how limited talent is in some of the regions, in terms of elite talent, where you could actually build a competitive team against those other teams, and then it also, might highlight players that are underappreciated, in my opinion. So we're going to do that. Let me turn that light on. We're going to do that, starting off with the LCS. So I've already built these teams. I already know which players I want, but we'll talk through some of the reasoning here. So let's start. We're going to go from the bottom to the top, and I'm going to say whether or not I would even consider some of these players. So first up on Immortals: Revenge, Xerxes, Power of Evil, Arrow, and Destiny. I would not pick Revenge for this team. I don't think that he has the upside to warrant being on this level of team. Xerxes, it sounds like he's going to Astralis. I wouldn't want Xerxes either way. I think that there are better options in the jungle. Power of Evil, I would consider Power of Evil, but I think that I'd prefer to go in a different direction as well in that position. Then we have Arrow and Wild Turtle. I personally don't want either one of those players. I think that I would have taken Arrow a few years ago for sure. I think that he was a very good AD carry at one point. And then Destiny, I will not be picking Destiny. But again, he's the player where I could see him being on an okay team. It's just you're not going to build a team around him. On TSM, we have Huni, Spica, Takeover, Tactical, and Shen Yi. So I think that you can definitely consider Huni if you were trying to win now. But it would be kind of close. There were a lot of performances in spring near the end of the split where Huni actually looked better. Spica, I think Spica is the clear choice for a jungle in this situation because we're picking from Immortals to FlyQuest. I think that you have to take Spica here. I don't know who else you'd really even have an argument for to take over Spica. Takeover, we haven't seen much from him. Maybe you could consider him. I have a different mid lane option that I prefer. We have Tactical, and Tactical is one of the 280 carries that I would definitely consider. We've seen him be successful not only domestically but internationally. When Team Liquid was at Worlds, he won me 20 grand, so I'm kind of a fan of Tactical. I like his playstyle. I think that he has the playmaking upside that you'd want to build a team around potentially. And we saw that when TSM was playing completely around Tactical on champions like Jinx, they were actually somewhat successful. And then last but not least, we have Shen Yi. And if I knew for a fact that Shen Yi was going to stay in North America long term and learn the language, I would probably pick Shen Yi to be the support that I would want to have, because I know that he hasn't looked great for a lot of last season. But he is self-admittedly a very aggressive support player, and that's the kind of support that I want, especially with somebody like Tactical. So if Tactical and Shen Yi and TSM moving forward are a good team, it's because of their bot lane, most likely, like Spica and their bot lane being able to push them forward. So I would definitely consider 3 of the TSM players, and I guess that's kind of a cop-out answer because, a lot of people had higher expectations for TSM's spring split, because theoretically the unknowns that were there, they could have hit, they didn't, and we kind of have to deal with the consequences now. Next up, we have Counter Logic Gaming. Poom was almost considered for the support role. Luger was definitely considered for the support role, and if you told me that you wanted to take Tactical or Luger, I think those are the only 2 realistic options out of the bottom 6 AD carries in terms of playing either for now or the future, or a combination of both. I think that both of those players can kind of do a blend of any of those. I think if you wanted to win the LCS this split, I think Tactical gives you a slightly better chance than Luger. But if you told me that you think Luger has a better long-term upside, that's really your decision. Whatever, go for it. I would not take Palafox. I would definitely not take contracts at this point. And I would consider Jenkins, and Jenkins is one of the 2 top laners that I would consider from FlyQuest through Immortals, because he can play the weak side top lane position very well, and he's an amazing Kennen player. And for the kind of team like that I would want to build, I would want the top side to be a weak side player that can theoretically carry if the perfect opportunity presents itself. But in general, I want somebody that's very good weak side and very good at a champion like Kennen, where the other team is always going to have to take that into consideration in their drafting plans. And Kennen could theoretically become a much more important champion next split when we get more utility AD carries, because the team fights are going to be a lot more, even more explosive before the 20-minute mark. So once Kennen gets his 1.5 to 2 item spike, he'll be very threatening in the flanking positions. So that's something that I would definitely look at. So Jenkins and Luger, I would consider both of them for this kind of team. Next up, we have Dignitas, and it was announced today that Fake God is not going to be on the team. So I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do, but could you imagine if Summit went to Dignitas? That'd be pretty interesting to me. I don't know if they have the money to make that kind of move, but that would be pretty cool. We have River, where I didn't include River because I think that with Spica you're getting a very good player that has a better runway in terms of like their age. So I would definitely prefer Spica. He's won an LCS MVP before, and he's just a high level jungler in my opinion. And it frees up an import spot. I didn't really take import spots into consideration for this, but it does that as well. Blue, I would consider Blue, but I have a different mid laner that I prefer. And then Neo and Biofrost. I wouldn't take Neo over Luger or Tactical, I think, if I was building a team. But I would consider Biofrost if I was trying to win right now, because he has been a very good... he's been a bright spot for Dignitas this last split. And I think he does have a relationship with Spica in some way. I think that when Spica first came up, Biofrost was on the team, so that would help a little with chemistry. For the Golden Guardians, Licorice, Pride Stalker, Ablaze Olive, Lost, and Ale. There are no players that I would consider putting onto my theoretical team. Licorice is good enough, but I would rather have Jenkins or this other player that I'm going to mention. I think you know who it is now. Pride Stalker, I would prefer Spica. Ablaze Olive, I have somebody else. And then Lost and Ale, I have other players that I like. So last but not least, we have FlyQuest, Kumo, Jose Dioto, Tukui, Johnson, and Afromu. I think that Kumo and Tukui are both good. You should consider both of them for this kind of team. So at the end of the day, the roster that I would choose would be either Jenkins or Kumo, depending on what you want to build your team around. I think that if you're building it around your bot lane, I think I'd go with Jenkins. In the jungle, I would definitely take Spica. In the mid lane, I would take Tukui or Jensen. And I know Jensen might not be a fair choice. I would probably go with Tukui, especially because there's the chance that he could be good for multiple years, or just a longer time frame. But again, if you wanted to go win this split, if you thought that Jensen gave you that upside and Biofrost gave you that upside, I could see why you would do that. And then we have Tactical and Luger in the bot lane. I'm leaning towards Tactical. And then Biofrost and Shenyi. I'd be leaning Shenyi, honestly. And I know that takes a lot of hope from my perspective, but that's what I would go with. So refining it one more time, I would say my final roster for the LCS, the best of the rest from the LCS, would be Jenkins, Spica. I would go with Tukui, Tactical, and Shenyi. So that's who I would pick. I'm not sure if they'd really have the chances to win first place overall, and in my mind, Evil Geniuses are the best team. So Jenkins against Impact, obviously prefer Impact. Inspired against Spica, I prefer Inspired, but I could see certain drafts where Spica might be able to beat him. Tukui against Jojo Pyun. I think that Tukui today is a little bit better than Jojo, but I think that Jojo's upside is immense. And then Tactical against Danny, I heavily prefer Danny. And then Shenyi against Vulcan, I heavily prefer Shenyi. So even with this team, taking players from those 6 teams, I can't come up with a roster that I prefer to Evil Geniuses. I probably don't prefer them to 100 Thieves or Team Liquid either, Cloud9, I didn't want to include them because they have a lot of good players, and I wouldn't want to just make a new version of Cloud9. So that's what I'd be going with. So that is the first region out of the way. Next up, we'll do the LEC. And the LEC was actually pretty tough for me because I don't think that the LEC has a huge problem with like parity. I think that their teams are pretty close to one another, and you could either say to yourself, well, the reason why they're close to each other is because they're not very good, or the reason that they're close to each other is because they're all good. And personally, I lean towards a lot of the players are good, but the team level overall isn't very high. I really do think right now that the top teams in the LCS, I think that they're a little bit better than the teams in the LEC. Like Team Liquid, 100 Thieves, and Evil Geniuses, if you put them all into the LEC, I think that all three of them would make playoffs, for example. It'd be close, like some of them might be at the bottom of the playoff table, but I think that they would get into playoffs. So for this, we're only going to take players from 4 teams: Astralis, BDS, SK Gaming, and Mad Lions. So first up, from Astralis. Astralis keeps losing players. When I did this earlier today, they had Zenzara. They don't have Zenzara anymore. Now they have Xerxes. I wouldn't take Xerxes for this team. I would not take Dajor. Actually, I would take Kabe. So Kabe is the AD carry that I would pick from this, assuming that my goal is to be competitive right now. And this team is going to be built to be competitive right now. So we start off with our AD carry Kabe. So what that does in my mind is it means that I need to have a carry player in the top lane, a carry player in the jungle, and potentially a carry player in the mid lane. And I kind of think that's what Team BDS is trying to do. So from BDS, Adam, Syncroft, Nuclear In, Xmatty, and Limit. I would consider Adam for that role. I think that he is the best top laner that's not on a top 6 team. So I would start with Adam. I know that some people would probably say you should take Armut, but because I have Kabe, I want the upside of a player like Adam, even though he's toxic, potentially, and might destroy the chemistry of the team. I'm willing to take that risk on this theoretical team. Syncroft, I would not pick. I have somebody else. Nuclear In, I would consider, but I don't really love Nuclear In. I would prefer to get some other kind of mid laner from somewhere else. And then Limit I would consider if I was trying to win now, because I do like his playmaking upside, and he proved a lot last year in playoffs. Next up, SK Gaming. I don't want any of the players from SK Gaming. Genax is not better than Adam. Gilius is not better than the jungler that I want. Certus is in the conversation with the 2 other mid laners that I would consider. And then Jesu and Treats, I don't want either of those players. I don't know what that was. Something tried to choke me. I think it's because I talked bad about Gilius. So, next up, we have Mad Lions. And obviously, you could say, just take the Mad Lions roster as is, and you would be better than some of the teams that were in playoffs. I do agree with that, but that's not what we're doing in this video. So Elyoya is the clear choice for a jungler here. So I definitely want Adam. I definitely want Elyoya, and I definitely want Kabe. I also want Kaiser. I think that Kaiser, even though sometimes I don't love his play, and I don't necessarily love the way that he thinks about the game, just from the interviews that I've seen, I would want him probably. So it would be Adam, Elyoya, Kabe, and Kaiser. And really the team is built around Elyoya. I am not the biggest Elyoya fan in the world, but he is a good enough player to build a team around in the LEC, I think. He is one of the better junglers in the LEC, period. I just don't think he's the best jungler in the LEC. So I would build my team around Elyoya. I'd give him a utility AD carry in Kabe, who we know can deal with whatever in the laning phase, and then get to those late game team fights and be impactful. We'd have Kaiser, so we'd have a decent laning phase with Kabe and Kaiser in the bot lane. You could also move them around the map if you wanted them to rotate for Rift Herald and stuff like that. They're intelligent enough players. They have a lot of experience. Then we have Adam in the top lane, so you're getting a carry top laner. That is going to warp the style of the team, but that's also why I like having a bot lane like Kabe and Kaiser. And then in the mid lane, I think that you can go with Nuclear In or Reeker. They're really not the focal point of this team. Whichever one is going to feed less is the one that I would pick. I don't know. I don't have a good feel for either one of those players. I think that if I had to go like gut instinct, pick one that you think is going to be better, I would go with Nuclear Int. But I don't really love either one, and that's really what I would do for the LEC. So I would say we have the team built around Elyoya. We have Adam in the top lane, Nuclear Int in the mid lane, and then Kabe and Kaiser in the bot lane. So now let's go to Korea, and this one was pretty easy. I think that I do like a lot of these players. It's just that I would have trouble with support because I don't really like any of the supports on the lower tier teams. So let's go from the bottom. Because there are the 4 teams, T1, Genji, Damwon, and DRX. I'm not taking any of those players because those teams are good. So we're starting off with Hanwha Life. For Hanwha Life, I think that Samdi and Willer are 2 players that I would consider. Willer played well last year at Worlds, and I thought that they would definitely keep him and build around him. But once they got rid of Chovy and Deft, I guess he lost favor with the team. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Willer resurface on a different team at some point in the summer or next year. Willer was the player that I was leaning towards if I was building a team for the future. And then Samdi, same thing. But there's a different AD carry that I like more. In Sandbox, we have Closer. I think that Closer is the clear choice here. And then Kale is also a pretty clear choice. The reason I would want somebody like players like Closer and Kale is because they're both pretty young and they both have Kale because he's young, and then Closer because he has a good pedigree coming over from T1. He looked like he was going to be the heir apparent to Faker. They got him some games, knowing that Faker would still be here. So that speaks to the potential skill of somebody like Closer. I want Closer on my team. So he's definitely my starting mid laner. Next up on Nongshim, we have Kana, Dread, BDD, Ghost, and Peter. And we also have Effort. So I like Effort in general. If I didn't pick Kale, I'd probably pick Effort. And then I think Kana is one of the best top laners in the world, so I would pick Kana for sure. He would definitely be my starting top laner. Then we have Dread. I would definitely consider a player like Dread as well. So if you wanted to try to win right now, you're probably better off going with Dread. But if you wanted to build longer term, I think that you could probably justify going with Willer instead. So we have Kana, Willer or Dread, Closer, Samdi, and then Kale or Effort. And the last player that I would consider is actually coming from KT Rolster. So I'm not even using players from Kwangdong Freaks or Fred at Brion. You just give me these 4 bad teams and I'll make a good team. And that's because I would want aiming. I think that I would probably pick aiming over Samdi. I don't think there's that big of an age discrepancy between the two. I liked aiming when he was on BLG. So I think that's probably the direction I would go. And I think that a team with Kana, Dread, Closer, aiming, and Effort, I think that instantly makes you a playoff team. And you'd be competitive with DRX. I'm not sure you'd be better than DRX. But you're going from a bunch of players who aren't on playoff teams to a 4th place team. And I think that's pretty good. So again, I would go with Kana, Dread, Closer, aiming, and probably Effort. And that's that. And then the LPL team is actually legit. I think the LPL team is actually very good. Like if you gave me this LPL team and you put them in the LCS, LEC, or the LCK, I think that they would for sure be a playoff team. I think they'd also be a playoff team in the LPL. So let's go to spring season. So from Thunder Talk, I don't want any of these players. LGD, I don't want any of these players. Team World Elite. Oh, I forgot about Beishang. Give me Beishang for sure. So that's even better. So I was thinking that I would pick Shun from Invictus Gaming, but I definitely prefer Beishang to Shun. So that's my first player. Definitely taking Beishang. Shie is a player that I would consider, but there's somebody else that I like more. Invictus Gaming, we have Shun. I would consider Shun. I also considered Zika, but there's somebody who's much better in my opinion in the league still. On Anyone's Legends, we have ZDZ, Xiaohao, Forge, Betty, and Zwuji, and Chow Chow. I don't want any of them. Then on Ultra Prime, we have Allies, ZS, Hacker, Cryant, Elk, Xiaoxi. I want Elk and Xiaoxi as my bot lane. I think if you take Elk and Xiaoxi and you put them on almost any existing playoff team, they'd be a little bit better. I think that Elk is a very good AD carry, and I think that Xiaoxi is a very good support. So I want both of those players. So far we have Beishong for sure, Elk for sure. Like Xiaoxi, I could hear an argument for somebody else, but I definitely want Beishong and Elk. On OMG, we have Cream. Cream is clearly the mid laner that you would want for this team. There's nobody else I would even really consider. He's the first person who I thought of, and he's the kind of player that you want to build a team around. And then the last player, we're just missing one player, and that's obviously Breathe in my mind. I think that Breathe is a very good top laner. BLG has struggled a lot this split. They were going back and forth between Doggo and Uzi. I think that once they solidify the jungle position, I think that their team does have some good upside. If Uzi is gone, that'll also probably drop their odds to win, which is a good thing for us, and then that's a good time to get in on BLG. So my team from the LPL would be Breathe and Beishong, so reuniting them from when they were both on World Elite. Then we'd have Cream in the mid lane, and Cream is a very exciting mid laner. Everybody likes Cream at this point. And then we have Elk and Xiaoxi, which is a legitimate bot lane. I think that this team would be a potential... They could make Worlds. I think that they could make Worlds and actually like make a run at Worlds. That's a really good squad. It'd probably be expensive to get them all on the same team. But that's probably my favorite potential squad. And then if we did a best of the rest... I think that I would want Kana over Breathe. I would probably take Beishong. I would take Cream. And then I would take Elk and Xiaoxi. So it's really just the only switch that I would make from it being an all LPL team would be to take Kana and sub him in for Breathe. Because Kana is that good. Kana is just an extremely good carry top laner. But that's basically it. So, it was a fun idea. I know that there's a lot going on right now with different rosters. The NFL draft is tonight, so, people getting drafted onto new teams. So it seemed like a fitting video for the day. But that's it. That's all I've got for you. Let me know what you think your team would be. Let me know who you would pick from these different regions, or, the best super teams you can come up with lesser teams or lesser talent, or teams that missed the playoffs. Whatever you want to do, just leave that in the comment section. I'll definitely respond to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.